everyone to Pickers Market, episode 44. New voice beginning here. Old voice off the couch.
Old voice.
Gangl was looking for an intro to start beforehand, and he comes in with, well,
how should we start this?
and then old voice.
yeah, then old voice, yeah.
I'm like,
Oh,
all right.
boys, give him a chance.
Welcome
Yeah.
to Garrison Keeler over here.
Wow.
Oh,
The whole crew is here. Obviously, we got Jeremy, Tyler, Lisa, and I'm somewhat hosting this. We'll see how this goes. We'll see how it
Somebody
goes.
gonna tag in like a tag team
Yeah.
match?
Jeremy, episode 44. You got a sports number for us?
Well, and you
I
got
have
a
one.
couple, and
Yeah, yeah.
I'm gonna let you have yours. But the one you didn't put on there, which I was offended by, is Reggie Jackson, man.
Yeah, I figured that's your favorite
Yeah,
all time. So
yeah. I mean, just the because it's the iconic of him because he had that
44,
big
yeah.
swing, so his whole back was always showing. And him hitting those 3 homers in the World Series, can't beat that.
yeah, I stuck with the NFL. I went with Chuck Foreman, Minnesota guy. So that was back in. You guys know who Chuck Foreman is? Tyler, Lisa.
Foreman Grills.
Oh, there we go.
That's George.
There we go. He was a running back for the Vikings when we actually went to Super Bowls and didn't win them. But anyway, he was in the 70s.
but
Dominant.
making it to the Super Bowl for the Vikings is already the success needed, right?
No,
good.
No.
no,
Okay.
no.
Yeah.
Just delays the heartbreak.
The other fun thing I like to bring up is Lisa here's got a fan club. Did you guys
Yeah.
know that?
Can you
it's
put
crazy.
in the applause, please? for
Yeah,
me?
give her the applause.
Nice. Love it.
So we're always looking for new subscribers. Every time I meet someone, talk to them, it's my mom, whoever, relatives. I got my mom. She's like, "Oh, listen to the podcast," and that Lisa, she's just wonderful on there. I'm like,
Oh,
so I don't know if it's the accent or the wit or the knowledge, and then on top of it,
It's
on the other
just the
total
the
package?
total
Package.
package.
Yeah.
Right.
on
now
top-
I'm blushing.
and then I've been hounding my son's friends. These are high school, college kids. Like, listen, oh yeah, they listen. And again, one of the first things I got is, boy, that Lisa's good. I'm like,
Oh,
wow, you got both ends of the spectrums. You got the
I
the
get-
80-year-olds
yeah,
down
yep.
to the teens.
I have them all.
You
That's
got
good
it.
stuff.
Hey, whatever works. I'm glad it works, man.
We're rambling now. so,
Tyler's jealous.
Yeah.
Tyler's
Yeah,
jealous.
I can
But
see it.
it
He's
hurts.
The
jealous, yeah.
smirk.
He's like, I have
Yeah.
the buttons.
He
But-
might be good in ping pong, but I am having the fan club.
There
So
you
what do
go.
you say about that?
but he dressed up today for the
I know. Tyler's
Can you
like
believe that?
fancy over there.
yeah.
Fancy.
Yeah, I thought about keeping my suit coat on, but
We hit.
Have we ever done that? I don't think we have,
No.
right? Even in the
Not
first
sure we
episode.
will either.
But we were dressed a little bit nice in the beginning, to be honest.
Oh,
I mean,
come
Keith's coming
on.
in his t-shirt now.
What? No,
We put in a
quarter
little bit more
zip.
effort.
For those of you on the podcast,
We're
it's
going
quarter zip.
the opposite way from what Mr. our president would like us to do.
when Keith comes rocking the tank tops in summer, that'll
AC/DC.
that'll tell you where we are in the
Yeah.
podcast.
So we got 44 episodes going strong. Do we got anything other feedback from any of our fans or anything you guys have heard out there? Tyler?
I've got a few of the guys from our gym listening,
Nice.
so that's been good.
Yeah, good.
They like
And
it.
they like it? They like
Yeah.
the banter in the beginning, or do they like the
Yeah.
actual
Not so serious, right?
Yeah.
It's not all
Mm.
finance talk.
That's the one thing I got on the
Yeah.
feedback is they kind of like the beginning, kind of hearing
Yeah.
about us and Lisa dominating. Jeremy, you got any feedback for us?
Yeah, that I should quiet down more often.
I've heard
I
that.
know.
Which is-
I've-
which is
I've-
really
I've-
accurate.
I've heard that, but I didn't want to mention.
Yeah.
That one guy talks a lot. All right, let's jump in here. One of the segments we haven't had back for a while is Wait What? We're talking about Berkshire stock. They just reported last week. It's over $1 trillion market cap, which makes it in the top 10. I think it's placed around 7th. And do you guys read much on it, Berkshire? Do you hear other than Warren Buffett? Do you? I mean, just looking for research on it after they reported, very few analysts actually follow it nowadays, which absolutely is
It's a
shocking.
death zone. Like they never have. Their
Yep.
their reports outside of his annual reports when he comes out and does his letter. The quarterly stuff is like
You get
Nothing.
Nothing. From
Nothing.
It.
Yeah.
Well, it's hard to. I mean, he's got so many businesses underneath too. Like between his stock portfolio and the companies he owns, like you got to do a lot of valuation on everything in there.
Yeah, that was the-
Berkshire black box. Is that what we should? Is that what we
mean-
should aggregate out there? What
That's
is
the-
under this black box?
that was the wait what. So they have 334 billion of cash, right? So I just said they have $1 trillion market cap. So a third of that is in cash, which
He's
They've
been
been-
hoarding cash for a while, though.
He's been hoarding it, but he keeps on raising it. So does that tell you guys anything about maybe markets outlooks? He's obviously considered one of the greatest investors ever by them increasing their Lisa.
Yeah, I think over the last year or so, especially when it kind of grew that high, and then some investors were like, "Oh my God, this is like we will have a pretty much drawdown in the markets because Mr. Buffett is kind of the oracle, right? And he's he is kind of foreseeing that, and that's why he's so much in cash. And I think with his latest letter to the shareholder, he addressed it a little bit
Mhm.
that so many people are so negative about it, and he kind of countered that a little bit without kind of revealing too much of his strategy, what he's gonna do without it. But he is like, hey, I'm still like bullish on equities long term, and most of investors' assets are still in equities, whether it's publicly traded or private, because that's a huge part of the business as well that not so many people talk about that much. So he kind of tamed down a little bit the bearish.
The reason for
talks
having so
about-
much
yes,
cash,
yeah.
right? Yeah. No, I do find it interesting myself. That's a big number, right?
Mhm.
I don't care if a third of your business is sitting in cash. That to me that reads that he's either waiting for another big acquisition, and he likes to buy stuff on the cheap. He's Burlington Northern in the past. He's big insurance, but if you look at cash as a third, stocks are around where was that 272 billion. So
Mhm.
he's actually got more cash than stocks, and big. He's got Apple, American Express, Coca-Cola. These are big stocks. Jeremy, you own some of these in the G50, and these that grab your attention that he's been buying or selling or continue to like.
I was laughing because when I was looking through the stuff that he owns, it's like, what am I just buying his stuff now?
Yeah, right.
I mean, he, I do think of the world in a similar fashion. It's interesting to me that you can say that you're bullish and have more
Mhm.
invested in cash than in stocks. I think that's kind of talking out of both sides of your mouth a little bit, or at least tell us why you have so much cash. Again, he gets a little bit, which is deserved. He gets a little bit of a
leeway
there, right? It's like, I haven't seen many of the reporters or the analysts raise your hand. And it's like, that makes no sense comparatively, right? You're hoarding cash, but yet you've never been more bullish. That doesn't really jive. And if he's a Graham and Dodd person, which he has often said, Ben Graham,
Deep
Ben
value
Graham
guy,
wouldn't
yeah.
buy $1 worth of things right now.
No.
So that's, so I don't know. Again, his longer term thesis, he's kind of lived on that for a while, and he's still very successful in a lot of the companies he owns. I own too. So we kind of feel the same way, but I just think that that's a little bit of talking both sides of your mouth there.
I mean, just to put the cash into perspective. So I thought it was funny you mentioned Coca-Cola. So he could literally buy Coca-Cola in cash.
Oh, it's pretty nice check to just write out, right?
Like
The whole thing.
Coca-Cola is 304 billion. If he's got 334,
Yeah, and I think he's got
He
roughly
probably
25 billion of it.
yeah,
in
Yeah,
there.
he's already got 25.
he already
of
owns
it.
a
Yeah.
good chunk of it. So I guess a little bit less than that.
No,
but
it's crazy. So
he could buy
yeah,
Bank of America.
Mhm.
He already owns some of that too. But
but he's actually been selling that one down pretty aggressively. I
Yeah.
think he still owns 30 billion, but I think it was well over 100 billion at one time. I think that's one of the big sells he's been doing. So people are questioning what does that mean for
and Apple too is a big sell that he's been doing the last 2 quarters, right?
Yeah, and the amazing thing I own in the Core Select, the stock's actually done remarkably well for the last several years,
No
right? So
question.
it's kind of a proxy for insurance and just kind of the overall economy. And you can see the names that he owns, but it's surprising me with as much cash as he has, that hasn't been more of a drag on his business. So that was the one shocker. The other thing I quickly like to point out on the wait what is the taxes paid, which this was kind of he paid $27 billion in 2024 for the corporation, which is about 5% of the overall corporate taxes paid to the federal government. So think about
That's
that.
wild.
Isn't it?
That's craziness.
That's 5% in just one
Big.
company. Yeah.
Sell a bunch of stuff, got to pay the tax on it. I
Yeah.
guess.
So I actually went and looked at like the, our Mag 7 kind of big names, kind of who else pays a lot of taxes. And it's kind of obviously some of the tech guys don't, which kind of, but there's other ones. Apple last year paid 29 billion. So again,
Really?
so these big companies are paying. And then the year before was 16, 19, 14 billion. If you go back the last 3-4 years. And then on the flip side, you got a name like Nvidia who paid 9 billion, which obviously they're the second largest company. And you compare that to, Buffett at 20 some billion. That's a little bit of surprise. And the one that kind of sticks out like a sore thumb is Tesla.
Mm-hmm.
They paid 2 billion last year, but the year before was negative 5 billion. So it's it's interesting to see, what these big companies are, because you hear a lot in the media who's paying what taxes. But
Yeah.
obviously, I think we need my bottom line is we need more Berkshires out there paying,
Yeah.
5% of. That'd be nice, right?
That would be nice for us.
Yeah.
And it could be a little bit less taxes for us.
Yeah, keep the economy going, right? All right, enough of Berkshire. Let's jump into the other kind of hot button that we're hearing a lot about is jobs and their importance. And obviously, with the executive orders signed, kind of the workforce optimization stuff that Trump, there's been a big focus on federal workers. Just want to put that in scale for everybody. There's roughly, Jeremy and I were talking about this yesterday. There's different numbers you can read, but the U.S. employment is about 164 million people working. It's a good number, right? How many federal employees do you think are out there, Lisa? Do you have any idea? Trick
is
question.
That in the notes?
Yeah. Lisa said she prepped a lot for this meeting, so I thought she'd nail this one. Anyway, it's Jeremy and I were talking yesterday. It's anywhere from 2.5 to 3 million. So
Okay.
point being is it's tiny, right? So media's focused on this, how many people in the federal government are actually getting potentially laid off, early resigning, or getting fired. The overall number of employees is 3 million out of the 168 million. So that's roughly 2%. That's a pretty small figure for so much attention to it. So and the reason we focus on job is because it drives the economy. So are you reading anything, Jeremy, into what's going on with the, this Fed movement and the number of employees and how important it is? Are we over analyzing it and over talking about it?
We're over analyzing everything for politics right now.
Point.
We certainly are, but I do think we have to be a little careful. Just from, you're absolutely right. The number as compared to the whole is small, right? But the incremental of that can be, if you just think about job gains, right? We're gaining 150, 170,000, sometimes lower, sometimes higher, right? Jobs per month.
Yep.
Well, if we start, firing people from the federal government, that number, that net number doesn't get so hot anymore. And we have to be a little careful about that. I think we're overestimating the amount of impact it could have. But again, for me, this is the most sensitive I am with regard to what's going to happen in the economy is what's going to happen with jobs and job sentiment. Because job sentiment is the first thing that people stop spending, right? And if they do that, that's a problem. And so if they feel, federal employees, whether it's impactful or not, whether it's less people take it up, those kinds of things. If they feel less confident in their job than they were 6 months ago, chances are they're probably not going to spend more than they did 6 months ago. So that's what I worry more about is the secondary effects of all the job volatility rather than the straight number, which again, like you said, we don't even know how many people have taken it up. They keep, bringing out, they bring some people back, it's kind of like, again, we can't get a concrete estimate of the number, but it's not going to be enough that even if they go through with all they're doing, that it's going to kill the economy. But I worry about sentiment.
Yeah. And unemployment right now, just again, backdrop. So this conversation, we're at 4%.
Yeah. Still low.
Still
very,
low.
very low.
I think, the average in the last 20 years has been 5.8.
Yep.
So we're still low. I just want to keep everything in perspective. Obviously, I 100% agree with what you said. It's directionally, what does that mean for the incremental person? And not only is it your income, but your lifestyle, right? That's how you feel about what you're spending and your confidence level. Tyler, got anything to add on the?
I think part of the concern is there's a tipping point too, right? And I don't agree with what's happening, but I think the case for why people are pulling back, especially with consumer sentiment that we got out last week, came in a lot lower than expected. I think it's there becomes a tipping point when so many people start to get laid off. Yes, we have a lot of jobs available for them to potentially fill, but how long does that take? And that slowdown for that small chunk, yes, it's a small chunk and small portion of the pie, but how long does it take to finally get them back into the system? And if that period is too long and spending starts slowing there, does that tip over into other areas? Kind of like what Jeremy was saying, but I am more of a believer that there's enough jobs available that they'll be eaten up, or they'll be able to eat up whatever jobs are out there. And it's such a small, and talking about the percentage wise, it's also mainly DC.
Yeah.
That's what
right. So I feel bad for DC housing owners because they're going to get smacked. But generally speaking, yes, there are some federal stuff here in Minnesota, other states, but for the most part, it's DC, and that's who's really going to feel the effect.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's going to be a big, wide issue going forward, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, no. If you look at this again, I'm pulling Tyler. I'm doing all the stats today. If you look at the DC, this absolutely shocks me. 43% of the employees in DC are federal. That's pretty high. We look at Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa, kind of around here. It's 0.6% of employees. To your point, and so it's like, what could directly be impacted? I certainly would think if you're in the DC market and you're worried about your job, which then goes into the housing market, that would be one area that would definitely be, I would be very leery of.
Going back to what Jeremy talked about with jobs, the other question about how much can we keep the new jobs added or non-farm payrolls going is the government has been the big adder of jobs the last 2 years, right?
Sure.
So if we continue to expect 170 or 240,000 jobs added in the last month for every single month, then we're going to have an issue. Everybody's going to have to recalibrate their numbers quite a bit lower, probably more to expect that 70 to 100,000 jobs added, right? It's not going to be the hot jobs market that I think Trump was throwing out there throughout his campaign, because I don't think we'll get there.
Yeah. Lisa, you got any thoughts on the overall?
And also, like federal workers as part of like the overall worker participation in the U.S. might be low. But what I heard is for every one federal employee, there are 3 to 4 individual contractors that could be affected as well.
That are not part of
that are not part of
the government hires contractors to help them with databases and different things like that.
And if they are affected as well, that number can be actually pretty much higher than what we see right now, which can give a little bit of a surprise there, like how much impact it actually has.
That's kind of like when we talk about the housing market. It's roughly, people are saying it's about 15% of the overall economy, just because of not just the house you buy, but it's the contractor, it's the lawyer, it's the real estate agent, stuff like that. So I do think you're right. I mean, so are there any sectors or industries that we need to watch more closely because of what's going on with these potential Fed jobs lost?
Well, I mean, services certainly can be impacted, especially like professional services. That, government contracts are lucrative at the end of the day, and replacing those is difficult to do because there's usually an extended contract, there's usually time. I'm a little leery of that, just because I think about it the other way a little bit. Is even if, let's say let's take jobs out of the equation, am I going to submit a budget right now if I'm a federal employee for like, hey, I need a 7% increase in my budget because I'm doing this initiative or this initiative? Even if it's worthwhile, are you going to submit that? No. You are not going to do that.
Well,
right
you
now.
may submit it, but it ain't going to go through. Right?
You might as well submit it right. Yeah, you might as well submit it right into the garbage. Yeah, right into the paper shredders where you want to submit that along with and then get your resume out.
Yeah,
that's the kind of thing I worry about. Right, is that has ancillary effects. Right, is that we're talking about direct influence right now. The secondary effects of all of that, like you said, 3 people that are wedded towards that, those things, and we don't know where that'll pop up yet, but that's my first thought is, hey, if I have 20-30% of my revenue comes from government contracts, I'm probably sweating a little bit right now.
Yeah, and their pay, I just looked at what the average pay is for federal employees, $80,000 nationally, which is pretty solid, right?
It's pretty good.
It's pretty
average,
good.
Yeah.
DC, $137,000. So that would be the, if you're working in DC, whether you're either a federal employee or not, I would be probably a little nervous. And that's why you see some articles on the housing market and starting to tip over a little bit in the DC market. So that's something we need to keep an eye on. And again, the reason we talk about jobs are so important, consumers are so important. Consumers drive 2/3 of the overall GDP growth rate.
Yeah.
Right. That's ultimately why we care as investors. And besides just the humanity of, people working and things like that, it's very important. So if we see a slowdown, even if it's relatively small, I think everybody here talks about just the ancillary effects. So is there anything, Tyler, that you can add on sectors, industries that you're watching? We've seen, you mentioned the retail sales of the recent number was minus 0.9%. So are you reading anything? Is that Fed job related, or is it just more maybe consumers have been overspending, kind of maybe nervous about the news that's in the markets?
I think it could be part of it, but I think it's just more overspending Christmas or holiday spend.
Little
probably.
hangover action.
Little
You're talking
hangover.
about your own personal
Because-
budget.
because-
Ibuprofen went up, but everything else went
Well, I
down.
mean, think about it, right? So like they always put out what people, the survey of what you expect to spend during Christmas holidays. And it always comes in a heck of a lot more of what they actually spent. Right. And so I think from a consumer that's probably already stretched to then stretching even further, I think it's probably just, they need to take a little breather here and probably recoup. But there was also another stat that came out that said the top 10% earners, or was it the top 1% earners?
Top 10%.
Top
I saw.
10% earners make up 47% of consumer spending right now. So that's where you start to get into the concerns and why I've been cautious on consumers is the spend
A little top heavy.
Yeah.
So and we've known that the higher income cohorts have been driving it. So I don't think the retail sales, I mean, it's not great to see that, but it's not necessarily a shock either. When you start to see some of these different data points on who's spending, who's not, how are they feeling, are they good, bad, that kind of thing. So
Yeah. Speaking of consumer, Lisa, Walmart. We talked about that a little bit.
got to bring up a sore wound.
No, we just want to cover it. Just kind of ties into all this.
Walmart.
Yeah. Did you read anything?
You
or
really
did you
love it now.
Yeah. Did you
It's an
see anything?
investment
Went from a trade to investment.
Yeah, trade to an investment.
Did you see anything in the consumer related that was really poor, or was it just more
Mhm.
on other things that the stock sold
I
off
think
a
the
little bit?
numbers came in good.
Yeah.
The expectations were pretty high, given that the stock reacted more like a tech stock rather than a brick and mortar grocery store last year, like
Yeah.
70% plus. That's crazy for what it is, actually, a staple at the end of the day. So expectations were pretty high, and it kind of beat their earnings on a smaller margin than investors were expecting. I think the guidance was what threw off most investors. That was the sore point. And they're not really saying that the consumer is completely losing it, so to speak, but it's more cautious at all, and especially with the tariffs. With Walmart is maybe a little bit more isolated than other retailers, but still importing a lot from China and Mexico, and still not completely isolated around that. But I think we have to be a little bit careful with Walmart and its guidance, because it's the first report of the year, and they tend traditionally to guide.
They did the same thing last year,
right?
Except for the valuation wasn't at 37 times. That was
right.
Jeremy and I had this debate last year at one point in time too.
Oh, you won though.
Yeah. Stock's been going up.
Stock was phenomenal.
Yeah. So maybe a little bit more cautious.
Yeah, and I don't really think.
But still, it flows into a lot of other retailers, because
Mhm.
that is the large kind of grocery store that kind of is maybe more middle to low income earners, but now also attracts more higher income earners. So it's a good mix of people that it kind of reflects, and it has a lot of impact on other retailers.
I didn't see that they were panicking the consumer at all. I think it was just
that's
more the guidance, they kind of investing in other systems,
Right.
and
So I think it's a
valuations
little bit.
high. So I didn't get. Did you guys get the sense that Walmart was panicking on the
No.
consumer, or really called out a cautious consumer?
Panicking? No,
No.
absolutely not.
Yeah,
I think it
I
was
think
a
it was
little
more-
bit too much of a reaction after.
I think it was more valuation,
I did too.
and guidance wasn't the blockbuster that I think people were
Mm.
expecting. And so, if you guide conservatively and you've got a 37 times next year's earnings, probably makes sense.
Yeah. All right, let's broaden it back out for the whole earnings season and jobs related. Did you guys hear anything, call outs by any companies in particular that were job cuts or freezes or lack of hiring? Did anybody got any stats on that?
I think the largest one that stood out for me is like Southwest. I think it's their first cut ever in history. Southwest Airlines.
Mhm.
They cut.
Stock's been terrible, by the way, and I own it.
Generally, yeah. They
Insane.
cut to corporate employees as well as Starbucks. They are in a turnaround phase as well. Didn't work quite well the last few years. They are also slashing corporate stuff, and kind of as part of their overall strategy to get back on track. So I think that was the largest on jobs that I took away.
Starbucks is the one that I noticed
Starbucks
too.
was-
Is that the same for you, Tyler?
1,100. Yeah.
It's a big number, and I think again that was probably maybe a little bit of a bloated new CEO coming in and kind of putting his stamp on the company. So not a surprise. Stock's was terrible.
It wasn't part of the quarter, but I think Apple's recent announcement of 20,000 hires over the next 4 years with the $500 billion investment. I think that was big news to me.
Yeah.
Especially because it's going to be here in the US too.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. That's what I heard a little bit more of is we're going to be hiring here a little bit more, which is good. I didn't hear anything massively like sea changing with regard to rationalizing staff, but that's usually, they're the last people. Market's going to react well before those numbers come out and those things. That's what we'd have to be careful of. I just wanted to go back for 2 seconds because we talked a lot about the retail sales weakness. Remember that half the country was freezing and the other half was
burning,
going over a fire. So data, 1 point doesn't make a trend. I think you're probably onto something. I think, but be careful about being that one. Just that, I hibernated for the better part of 2 weeks because it was miserable around here.
You got Amazon, Jeremy.
Well, yeah, that's true.
Front step back.
That is true. But the old,
I understand.
And now I have DoorDash too.
Yeah.
Amazon and DoorDash are just like, there's, they might as well just set up a little kiosk at my place and be like, where do you want to go tonight?
Distribution centers now near.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, right in the front yard. But yeah, that's the kind of thing that, we have to be a little careful when those numbers come out. But if the next one has that trend, then you got to be looking at that because, again, I think that'll actually front before we see the job loss, right? I think people will come out in quarters, the rationalizing. Usually I look to that as like, okay, are we flushing this out now? Not as a precursor to what to come.
And I think another good point on this is like people might be a little bit and are concerned about policies, about tariffs that might fasten their belts a little bit.
Yeah, I think that was the main focus I heard on calls.
Right, the uncertainties around that. And also when it comes to policies and uncertainties, you might not, there are two ways to look at it. Whether you go out and spend more just to focus on something else, or you're like, okay, I'm just not feeling with everything that's going on. I don't know.
Shopping therapy,
right? Yeah, it can go 2 ways, but I think that's a lot of the confidence that.
I think bottom line, we're still in a fairly decent spot for employment and jobs, and so a lot of stuff you're hearing out there. I just want to make sure everybody's kind of aware and kind of put it in perspective. I think generally speaking, we're still in a healthy spot. Now that could change. Jobs are a lagging indicator, like Jeremy pointed to, so that they're typically the companies are last to know. But for now, I think things are decent.
To that point, though, we had a swath of layoffs on the tech side. What was that 22 after they had the bloated after 2020, 2021? So we heard about recession looming. Now maybe the management staff doesn't necessarily want to just take it on the assumption that there's a recession, right? Maybe they want to see it in the numbers and they weren't. But 2022 felt different. Like they were trying to hold on to staff because it cost them so much money to ramp up for the demand that they had post-COVID that they didn't want to start to let go of the people that they just finally trained 2 years later and have to lay them off and then potentially have the added cost in a year and a half when this recession was over to then hire them again and retrain them. So I wonder if we're in a different environment now where companies are willing to hold on to maybe a bigger staff, even if those numbers are showing a little weaker.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Would that be a fair assessment, or would you disagree?
No, I don't. I actually don't think
you're
it's
looking at me like.
I don't think it's terribly different than
like Tyler,
history in the effect of people. I take a general sentiment that people don't want to fire other people. Right? It's like that sucks. So you don't want to have to do it unless you're forced into it, and there can be a variety of different reasons to do it, but. I think, in your situation, what you're talking about, especially with the tech, they just were hiring people. Yeah. It's just like, it's the AI horsepower bet now. It was with people then. It was like, I'm just going to take everybody. Yeah. And then I have this, and then I'll figure out what to do with them later. I don't think we're there anymore. I think you're absolutely right there. I don't think we're, again, that's why I always think that jobs are a lagging indicator is because people will delay it as long as possible because that's painful.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's why it's a lagging indicator, right?
There we go.
Because it's like, comes later.
Because I'd rather do other things first than
firing people
sit in an office and start firing people.
Yeah.
True.
All right, let's wrap this up a little bit with spaghetti wall and kind of jobs. Kind of, Lisa, you got any good stories
Oh
of
my
either
God, I
when you
have a
started
great
or
story
some
here.
jobs you were? All right, I knew you were ready to roll.
She's the headliner for a
Yeah,
reason.
good
you
point.
know? She's got
Spotlight
stories.
back on Lisa.
So I tried to make it short, but I was born in Linz, which is the largest city in Upper Austria. Still like 270,000 people,
Okay.
so not as many. But the most of my young years, I grew up in a city 40 minutes away, like 12,000 people. Not just that everybody knows everybody, but pretty small, right?
Yeah.
And I went to high school somewhere else, so I was not there during the week. I lived kind of in a student home and kind of did my stuff there on weekdays. And on the weekends, I started working with around 16, 17, just next to my job. And I liked it, to have some money the first time I had my own money and can do with it what I want. So at the height of my career there, next to school, I had 3 jobs simultaneously
Wow,
the
look at
weekends.
you.
And in
How
the
does that
kind of
work?
Yeah,
whatever.
totally.
Yeah. And people in the city I lived, I had a nickname, the Phantom.
What?
Yes. And that's for a reason, because I worked in different locations and some people were clients in those different locations, sometimes on one day, and they saw me in 3 different locations, sometimes on the same day. And I was like, this is crazy. You are like a phantom. You're like everywhere.
Like Wonder Woman.
Right.
So
The
yeah.
Phantom.
So I had a
That's-
nickname because I had like
the-
3
the-
different jobs.
Lisa,
and
the original side hustler over there with the
Yep.
3 jobs at once.
Wow,
Yes.
we got a new nickname for you. in
The
Johnson.
Phantom?
Yeah.
Yeah, I kinda like that
it. Yeah. Tyler, you got any good jobs or stories? I know you got a few.
Oh, I did the lawn mowing thing at like 13, 14, just like going over to neighbors, asking if they wanted their lawn mowed
did
for
the
like
same
20
thing.
bucks.
So you did the door to door.
yeah.
So you would go
Mhm.
knock
Same.
on the door.
but then
Then word got
my neighbor got his license and then he started working for a whatever. So I've done the lawn mowing thing. Worst job though, I would say I worked at
your state fair job. You
state
love
fair
that
job.
though. Oh, that's the worst.
That was the worst.
Yeah,
What was that
nice.
one? I
Worked
forget.
at French Meadow Bakery.
Oh, yes.
So
No way
you
to
know,
call them out too.
Right.
Well, whatever.
Redacted.
They're not listening.
They're in the French Meadow.
It was brutal. Like, I mean, you're there for French Meadow, we would close, I think, at 9 or 10. So, I mean, you're there from your main food is breakfast.
Mhm.
So, like, you're there from 6 a.m. right before it actually opens. And then Steph and I would always do doubles. So we would work the morning shift and the night shift. So we'd be there from 6 to 10, basically, just freaking.
Does it
in the
pay
heat.
well at least?
Ugh.
And French Meadow Bakery, you're baking, so you're next to ovens, and it was just hot.
Does it
all
pay
day.
well?
No,
At
minimum wage. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Okay.
That sounds awful.
That is awful.
Jeremy, any good,
So,
good or bad?
well, in high school, I was a janitor. You can all imagine how good I
Oh,
was at
wow.
that.
Wow.
The most unhandy guy I know.
You would think I could use a room. Turns out I can't. Yeah. My favorite part about that story is I worked with a few friends of mine, and I was terrible. I should have been fired, and I was on that path. But for some reason, the supervisor there decides to tell my friends that I think I'm gonna let Jeremy go.
What?
So they were like calling me, and they were like, "Hey, dude, you aren't gonna have a job here soon." I was like, "Well, that makes perfect sense." But I still don't know to this day. Was I fired or did I quit? I don't know.
So you wanted to quit before he had the
Oh
opportunity
no, I
to
didn't
fire
want to
you.
quit, but it was
Yeah.
a
It
was coming.
deserved firing.
Yeah,
Let's
yeah.
put it that way. I just was not good, nor
Mhm.
did I have the will drive to have 3 jobs, let alone my one I was terrible at. So, but I just kind of stopped going. So I don't know. Did I quit or was I fired?
That's a great question. I'll add on to that one. My worst, shortest job or whatever. I had many jobs, paper boy, lawn boy. But then one year in high school, when a girlfriend I knew, her mom worked at Golden Plump, right? The chicken,
Oh, chicken.
right? Chicken's like, oh, why would I want to work on there? But she goes, oh, there's an easy job. And, instead of making $5 an hour, you can make $10 at this. You basically look at baby chicks, you vaccinate them in not in the actual barns. This is actually in the nice plant. I'm like, well, that's easy enough. Literally, first day I'm in there 15 minutes. It's me, I'm 17, 18 with 50, 60-year-old 4 other ladies looking at chicks for about 10, 15 minutes. We get a guy comes in from the barns, which is a few miles down the road, and basically said, yeah, we need help vaccinating the chicks. Who do you think had to do that of that group of 5?
Low man,
new guy in the mail there. So sure enough, I ended up in the barn from like 7 a.m. till like 7 o'clock at night. The most dirty, filthy job. You couldn't breathe. You had all the chickens in one side of the barn, like in a quarter of the barn, just behind this fence. You had to grab them by the wings and vaccinate every one of them. Took all day. I had like
Are they mean? Like,
they're beating you in it. You can't see. It's dusty as all get out. There's no masks. This is back in the 80s, right? It was just like the working conditions are awful. And I'm making $10 an hour. I was like, who cares? I'm gonna die after this. Literally. I'm like, it's 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, looking at my watch. One's done time. The guy's like, no, we got to finish the burn. I'm like, what?
My other job is eating asbestos.
Yeah, that's about it. So I'm like, literally, that was a one job. I quit one day, and same type of thing. I'm like, they didn't fire me, but I quit. I never even told my girlfriend's mom. I'm like, I'm just not going back. If they give me a check for that one day, great. If not, that's the way it's gonna be. So that was my worst.
Did you get paid?
I did get paid, but it was like weeks later. But I'm like, and her mom just always kind of side-eyed me after that. So that was my job.
Dude, that's brutal.
All right.
Well, I would have got fired from that for sure too.
Well, on the note of Jeremy and our jobs of getting fired or quitting, whatever they were. So we'll have to end this segment. But if you guys like it, like and subscribe.
Mm-hmm.